Hello people, and welcome to Crypto Exposed. Ripple CEO confirms end of SEC lawsuit. Will BlackRock join XRP ETF race? Okay guys, let's get into it. Okay, so it's official guys, this lawsuit is pretty much done now. They're wrapping it up. Garlinghouse has announced this. So we're pretty much getting to the end of this whole thing. And so, I've seen since this news has come out that there's been a lot of influencers being so positive about this and explain how big of a thing this is. And, I've kind of looked at this in quite detail, like researching and seeing what, lawyers and stuff have to say about this. And I thought I'd do a thorough breakdown of this because, it's not as positive as everybody makes out, right? Like, I just want to kind of explain what the reality is of the situation and the implications, because not to say that this is overall bad. It's not. I think overall this is a good thing, but it's not all positive, right? And so what I want to do is give you a proper breakdown here where you can get like what the good of this is, what the bad of this is, and the implications, okay? So I'm going to go into this in detail and explain to you, how this is going to impact XRP, how it's going to impact Ripple, and what this is going to lead to. Okay, so first and foremost, let's just get to the nitty gritty, because I'm sure this is the main thing that everybody's going to be asking. Is this going to affect XRP's performance in the bull run? I personally don't think so. Like, let's just say hypothetically, right, this news had have come out now and Judge Torres had have approved the ruling, right, the motion to dismiss, right? Okay, I think what would have happened is, yes, I do think we possibly would have had a pump. I think that is very possible. But I think it would have been short-lived, right? I don't think it would have held up, in like, getting the whole bull run back on track, because, we have to just be honest here. When we look at when XRP really burst out into $3, that was back in November, it wasn't just XRP that was moving, right? Like, don't get me wrong, XRP was the best performer and, really got things going, but like Bitcoin was moving too. Like, it was the whole market moving. And so, like, you have to just be real here and accept that when the bull run really will kick off, it won't just be XRP. It won't. It'll be a number of cryptos. So do I think we could have got a pump out of this? Yeah, I do. I do, because we are, apparently still in a bull market. So I do think that could have happened, but I don't really think this would have been like the big thing that sends XRP out to the stratosphere, basically, okay? And in regards to like the bull market, like, I don't think it's going to have an effect, because I think when the market runs, again, XRP will just run with the rest of the market. So I still think XRP will have its moments regardless. I don't think it's going to implicate it in that way, in my opinion. I think it will be absolutely fine. So price wise, I'm not really concerned about this, to be honest with you. But let's get into like the impact of all this. So the first thing I want to do is explain, what my opinion is of this. Now, I'll say this. Am I happy with Judge Torres denying this ruling? No. Let me be clear. I'm an XRP holder, right? So I want XRP to do well. Of course I do. I'm annoyed with this ruling. I'm not happy about this at all. I would have liked Judge Torres to approve the motion to dismiss. But as an adult and just being objective here, putting aside my factor of being an XRP holder, I can understand why this ruling has come out. I can. Even if I don't like it, I can be objective and say, I do understand it. And I'm going to break down why. Okay, so just think of this from Judge Torres' perspective, right? Okay, you've had the SEC who admitted when the lawsuit came out, they was under a different, regime. They was under the Democrats, now they're under the Republicans. So there's been a complete different shift in terms of, being anti-crypto and to go into pro-crypto. So we can all acknowledge that, right? But you've got to understand this. Imagine for Judge Torres, right? This lawsuit has been going on for, up to 4 years now, something like that, 3-4 years. Imagine she's invested her time into this whole process of this lawsuit. And don't forget, during the time when this was all happening, she did keep saying, hey, can you guys meet up and come to a resolution? Can you guys meet up and come to a resolution? So she kept giving them opportunities to try and come to a resolution, right? Now, again, I do understand that was under a different SEC. I get that. But think of it from Judge Torres' perspective, right? There's no resolution that's, come to, right, between Ripple and the SEC. Okay. So Judge Torres actually gives her a ruling, right? She gives her a lawful ruling, right? The SEC are not happy with this, so then they look to appeal. So it continues on for even longer. And, up until this point before, the Republicans come in, the SEC are just slamming Ripple the whole time in XRP, right? Just making out Ripple to be these terrible people, this terrible company, etc., etc. And then suddenly you get this regime change and they say, oh, actually, everything that we said before, can we just scrap all that? And can we actually scrap the fact that Ripple admitted to actually violating the law with some of their security sales? And can you actually just ignore what you said and we just drop the whole thing and we actually minimize the fine? Now, imagine how that would look for Judge Torres now to approve that, because first and foremost, and this is the biggest reason, this is the absolute biggest reason by far, you're basically trying to make Judge Torres accept that she's given a bad ruling, right? Because she's given her ruling now. She's acknowledged the lawsuit, she's gone through all the details, and she's given her lawful ruling. So now you've got these two companies, these two entities, the SEC and Ripple, who've basically spoke with each other and said, actually, can we just change all that around and can you go back on what you'd said? Well, if what Judge Torres has given out, she's saying, yes, Ripple have violated securities laws, which they admitted to in the lawsuit, by the way. Why is she then going to go around and say, oh, actually, yeah, that's fine. That's okay now. Don't worry. You got to understand how that looks. And it looks bad on her because it's almost like saying, okay, maybe I was harsh on Ripple and now that the government are okay and letting this go, I'm going to be okay with it too. So you've got to understand that from Judge Torres' perspective, this wasn't an easy thing for her to just come in and say, oh, okay, great, you've come to a resolution. If this had happened years before, I think she would have accepted it before it had gone as far as it had, but it's gone too far now and she's given her ruling, which is her lawful ruling, and she's applied the law to her belief to what this is. And so I do think this is a bit unfair because I do look at how, when Judge Torres had the first ruling about XRP not being a security and, how great that was, everybody loved Judge Torres, right? She was an angel to everyone. And now that she's denied this motion to dismiss, she's public enemy number one now. She's the devil, right? Everybody hates her. And I do think it's a bit unfair because if we just be adults about this and be objective, what she's basically saying is, look, I've given my ruling now. She's basically said, this is what I believe, this is my stance on this. You've violated securities law, Ripple, so, you are going to have this injunction in place. So for her to then just remove the injunction, it looks like she's saying, oh, actually, well, yeah, I guess you haven't really violated the law. I guess you are okay. It contradicts her original argument. So that kind of makes her look flaky and she doesn't really know what she was doing. It makes her look bad. So I can completely understand why she's done this, in all honesty. I don't like it. I'm not happy about it, but I understand it, right? And so I've got a woman here who was absolutely paramount when this whole Ripple and SEC lawsuit was going on. She was one of the people on X who was always giving breakdowns. So she's actually, I don't know to what degree, I don't know if she's actually a lawyer, but she's she knows the law. She's really good. Her name's Sherry. So you guys have probably heard of her if you're in the XRP community and you've been watching people's videos, because a lot of people were quoting her during the SEC versus Ripple lawsuit. And I just want to show you this from her bio. I focus heavily on facts and never shy away from a good debate. Engage with me at your own risk. The first thing I just want to highlight here is I focus on facts, heavily on facts. This is what I wanted to say. I hate to say it, but this is what it comes to. Facts don't care about feelings, right? And this is the point that I'm making here. Whether we like it or not, we have to stick with what the facts are here. So, one thing I want to show you what she said in regards to this ruling. Because, again, this is just what I've just said here. There's a guy who's replied to this, the Judge Torres ruling said, that feeling of sheer disgust when after years of abuse, the system suddenly pretends to be impartial, only to block a fair resolution. It's hard to put into clean words. Sherry then put, fair resolution? It actually makes sense to me. It would be like if you got caught stealing, admitted to it, then asked the police to just release you from going to jail. Ripple admitted they broke the law. So this is what I mean. We've got to be objective here. Right? As much as we want XRP to do well, Ripple admitted they broke the law. So this is where it's can we just be honest here and say, hey, Ripple did make a mistake? So asking Judge Torres to actually go back on the fact that they've admitted they made a mistake and just take away the injunction. Like, do you get where we're going here with this? Like, being objective, you do have to accept that, you know, Ripple did make a mistake here. Like, they did violate the law. Now, not to the degree that the SEC were claiming, of course, but they made a mistake, you know. So being objective, as much as I don't like it, I understand this, right? Okay, so let's get into the good things about this first and foremost. What's the good thing about this? Well, the good thing about this is that it's over. You know, like pretty much now they can just wrap this up. The majority of this is just done now. We can put it behind us and move on. Like, we haven't got to keep hearing about this now. We haven't got to keep, you know, waiting to see, is this going to get, you know, approved or denied? You haven't got to keep, you know, thinking that it's lingering over our heads. That's the positive. What's the negative then? So the negative is that Ripple haven't really got what they wanted here. And I think that's the thing that everybody's just ignoring. Like, that they're making out like, okay, it's just over now and that's it. Everything's great. And it's like, well, if that was the case, they could have just dropped the lawsuit from the beginning, like the appeals from the get-go, right? The reason why they went to do this motion to dismiss, etc., is like they wanted to try and get the injunction removed and the fine lowered. Now, if you ask me, this isn't about the money. I really don't think it's about the money. I think, yes, ideally they'd like to get the fine lowered, but in terms of the money, they can afford that. This is about the injunction. And that's the thing that I'm trying to say to you guys, where I say this isn't all positive, because they haven't got the ruling that they wanted. They wanted to get the injunction removed. Now, that injunction is still in place. That's where the problems come, right? Now, do I think this is going to be too much of a problem to a point where it's going to really hinder Ripple? I don't think so. And the simple reason why I say that is because they've been willing to drop the appeals. Because if this was really such a big thing to them, they would have carried on. If this was such a hindrance to them, they would have carried on with the appeal in hope to get the injunction removed. But the fact that they've just dropped the appeal now, I think they're just like, you know what? We've had enough of this. We're just getting tired of it. We don't want to keep chasing this. Let's just put it behind us. We'll accept the injunction. We'll accept the fine. Forget it. We've still got XRP is not a security, so we can still use it, etc. Like, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's a bit of an annoyance and a bit of an inconvenience, but we can work around it. That's what I would say. Because if this was something that was really gonna badly affect their business model to that degree, I think they would carry on. Because they'd be like, we can't really, this is too big of a thing to just stop. We've got to keep going, right? But obviously the other point with that is, if they carry on, then the SEC are probably going to carry on with their appeal, even though they don't want to. And what if the SEC were the ones to get the upper hand? I don't think that would have been likely. I do think most likely Ripple would have most likely won that argument, but I can't say for sure, right? You don't know who you're going to get. So let's go to some more posts by Sherry in regards to this. Okay, so this was a conversation that was going on just in regards to what happens from here going forward. And we've got a guy called Kevin saying, that's where I'm confused. If Congress writes legislation that contradicts this ruling, which stands, the judge's ruling or the new law? So Sherry said, any new laws that could harm Ripple further won't affect them. If positive, then Ripple can check with the court to make sure no action they would take would violate Judge Torres's order. This might invalidate the injunction in its entirety depending on the new law parameters. So there you go. Like, there is possible ways that, you know, with new rulings coming out and stuff, it could to a degree invalidate the injunction in its entirety. That's a possibility. So this is what I'm saying. Like, this isn't all bad. I don't want to just make it like this is just a completely negative thing. So that's a possibility. Okay. Another thing here that I just wanted to show you. So, what is the impact this has on Ripple if they do drop it? I imagine the fine, while large, is not their big worry. So what do they suffer by accepting the ruling instead of it being dismissed? So, as I said earlier, I don't think this is really about the money. I think if they could have got the injunction dropped and the fine was still the amount that it was, I think they would happily have accepted that. It's really the injunction that's the problem here. That's what they've really been fighting for. So, Sherry said, Ripple's quote, bad faith actor, unquote, label has approximately 3-ish years left. This label prevents them from filing for an IPO if that was what they wanted. Secondly, they can never sell directly to institutions until Congress writes a law that would effectively allow Ripple to sell. So there you go. This is what I'm saying. So this is why I said in regards to the injunction being the problem. Like, you know, they've got this bad faith actor like label around them now, which as Sherry said, that's going to be for like 3 years. So like, if they wanted to do an IPO, well, that's just on the back burner now. You know, that's something that they're gonna have to like wait for. And you know, the whole bad faith actor thing, like, could that be a thing where some companies maybe don't want to work with Ripple for a while that stigma is there? Possibly, right? Now, the one thing I will say is, like, when I see how like big XRP is getting now, it's getting a lot of attention. And I did a video not long ago saying how like Wall Street, institutions, banks, etc. are like literally watching XRP. It's been like acknowledged that people in high places are saying this. So I kind of feel like it's not going to have that much of an impact on them, to be honest with you. I feel like once the ball gets rolling, they're just going to want to get involved. And the thing is like, if people just do the research, they'll find out how bogus this lawsuit was anyway. Like, really and truly, like, Ripple have just been really unfortunate in this lawsuit. They really have, because one, they had the lawsuit put against them, but then they've had it turn around, which is obviously good, but it's had it turned around to the point where it's kind of too late now, because, like, as we've got here, Judge Torres has declined the motion to withdraw it. So, like, had this had been at a different time, Ripple might have benefited from the whole, like, lawsuit just being dropped altogether with no issue. So they've really been a victim of circumstance here, right? Which is just really unfortunate. And that's why I say, us as XRP holders, it's frustrating because we've just had to deal with so much. And this is just another kick in the teeth. Like, you know, like, we're in a position where the SEC are now finally with us and like, yeah, we're willing to drop this. And then it's like, no, Judge Torres is like, no, which again, I understand, but it's just frustrating. You know, it's just frustrating that we're in this position now where we've finally got the SEC with us. And now, you know, we've got Judge Torres, you know, against us. So, well, not against us, because as I say, I understand what she's doing, but yeah, it's just a frustrating situation. Okay, just want to see if there's any more posts that I wanted to show you from Sherry. No, I think that's all of them. Oh, okay, no, this is just one other thing. So this was before Ripple had confirmed that they were going to drop the lawsuit altogether. This guy called Big Bang said, what's the best for Ripple in the actual situation? Sherry said, I'd recommend continuing with the lawsuit. If Congress comes out with laws that could actually help Ripple in some way, then it might be worth the risk. Otherwise, the higher courts could overturn Torres because Ripple had a good shot at using their blue skies argument. So here you've actually got someone with a good legal background actually saying, I'd continue on with this. But they've decided not to. So this is what I'm saying again, like, you've actually got someone here with like a legal background who's saying, yeah, I'd keep going, you know. But look, I'll be honest with you, I do understand Ripple's position here. Like, the whole thing has just been draining. Like, I'm not even the one in that company, and I can imagine, like, I know how I've felt as just an XRP holder, how draining of a situation this has been. It's really not been a pleasant experience. So I can only imagine how, like, you know, Brad, David Schwartz, etc., you know, Chris Larson, I can only imagine how those guys are feeling. I think they're just ready to just put this to bed at this point. So this is it. Like, for me, what I'll say, I don't blame them for dropping the whole thing altogether. I do think that, to me, indicates that while the injunction is going to be an inconvenience, I don't think it's going to affect their business to a real strong degree here, because I think if that was the case, I think they would have continued on. If it really was that big of an issue for them, they'd carry on. So I think they've got a workaround. I think they've managed to figure out a workaround. But yeah, like, is this all positive? It's not. It's not all positive, you know, because a lot of people are like, oh, well, the lawsuit's dropped and it's over. And it's like, yeah, but they haven't got what they wanted, though. Right? They haven't really got what they wanted. What they wanted was the injunction dropped. Now, as I say, with the money, I think, yeah, the money being dropped would be ideal, because who wants to spend money that they don't have to spend? But it's really the injunction. That's really what the issue is. That's really what they wanted to get out of the way. And so the fact that they've dropped it now, it means that they have to leave the injunction in place. So that tells you that, you know, that's not really what they wanted. but I think they're just frustrated at this point. I think they've just had enough and they just want it to be over with. So I get it. I do get it, but it isn't all positive, right? Do I think Ripple will be okay in the end? Yeah, I do. Because if it was that big of a problem, I think they would be appealing. They'd be continuing with the appeal. So I don't think this is going to be that much of a detrimental impact to Ripple. But I do think it's going to be an inconvenience. I don't think it's the outcome that they ultimately wanted. But the main thing is that XRP isn't deemed a security. If Judge Torres had have ruled against us completely, that could have really, really harmed XRP. So what I will say is, while I'm not happy with what Judge Torres has done here, I do understand it from her perspective. Looking at it from her point of view, I do understand it. And I can't be too mad in that regard. I would have obviously liked it to be different, but I do understand why this has happened the way it has happened. The other thing that I'll just say is, what's ultimately happened here now is we're basically just at the point of where we was when Judge Torres gave her original ruling. So basically, people are making out like this is all positive, right? What's ultimately happened here is Judge Torres gave her ruling, right, that XRP is not a security, but she put the injunction in place and she put the fine in place, right? So however long ago that was, I really can't remember how, the date or even the year now at this point. I think it was it 2022 or 2023, I believe, something like that. I can't remember, to be honest. But we're basically right back there. That's all that's happened is the SEC had obviously decided to appeal. They've dropped the appeal. And so, Ripple only did the appeal because the SEC did the appeal. So all that's happened now is we're back to square one at that point when Judge Torres gave the original ruling. Nothing has changed. That's all that's happened here. So this is what I mean. When people are just making out this is completely positive and stuff like that, I'm like, can you give people the truth, please? Because it's not all positive. Can you actually just explain it in detail so they understand everything? So, I wanted to do my part as a content creator to give you the full breakdown. So this is it in its totality. Overall, I'm not concerned about it. I think it's fine. At the end of the day, I will be glad to see the back of this, in all honesty, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows, but it's not the worst thing in the world. Ripple will deal with it. They've clearly got a workaround in place because they're willing to drop the lawsuit. So they'll make it work. It'll be fine. So hope this has helped. Thank you very much for watching this. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And hit that bell. Take care.